Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up on today's show, the Las Vegas Raiders received some concerning news in regards to Christian Wilkins. We'll kind of get into what that concerning news is because, I don't know about y'all, I want Wilkins to be out there on the field, and the fact that there is still, let's just be honest, a cloud around this Liz Frank injury, it does make me very nervous because I know how lingering Liz Frank injuries can be. So the other thing that we're going to talk about on today's show is not only the Wilkins injury news that the nation needs to know, I also want to talk about some of the top Raiders players that they're going to need to step up if Wilkins does unfortunately have to miss some time. But I also want to look at some potential free agent targets that this regime could potentially sign because we have the money to go out there and do it. So if you did not see the news from earlier this week around Christian Wilkins, there have been rumors all offseason long that he could potentially need another surgery. And I know that Wilkins has been at Raiders OTAs and he has not been in a boot, which is a good sign. I know that there was some rumors and speculation that Wilkins has been in a walking boot at Raiders OTAs. That is not the case. Tashawn Reed has not gone back, but he has clarified that it looks like the whole Wilkins boot story got blown out of water by other people. He confirmed the reporting that we did on this show actually ended up being the case. But what's concerning is Wilkins, from a Liz Frank surgery, back on October 8th, 2024, is still dealing with some issues in regards to that foot. Pete Carroll, Raiders head coach, had this to say about the Wilkins injury. This has been a difficult recovery. He's done everything he needs to do. He's been here every day. He's here early working hard, but we are still working on it. He's not ready to get back out there. We're in the midst of a long, challenging process here. Fortunately, there's a lot of time. We're going to take every bit of it. We're trying to be really diligent. He's been on board the whole time, but it has been challenging. One of the things that we got to remember as head coaches, teams in general, they don't have to release any information in terms of an injury right now. But the fact that the words that were said by Carroll, he said that he's basically concerned about Christian Wilkins months after the fact of the surgery. And we know how important Wilkins is to this defense. So I need an honest answer, and honest answers only. I asked these questions back on our live show on Tuesday, and my number is going to go up here a little bit. So I got to know, scale it from 1 to 10. 1, you're not worried at all. 10, you're freaking the F out. What is your concern level with the injury regarding Christian Wilkins? I'm going to sit up here and go, it's a 6 out of 10 to me, which has gone up double the amount from 3 to 6 on Tuesday. I knew that he wasn't in a boot, and that's not really where my concern is. My concern is because he is, in my opinion, the second most important player on the Raiders defense. The Raiders defense is going to be predicated this season on being able to get pressure after the quarterback by bringing 4. Max Crosby's number 1. To me, Christian Wilkins is number 2, and if we're going to go about it with the way that our defense is set up right now, I know that early on in early on in the offseason, the secondary has been stepping up at practice, which you like to see, but I am still concerned with our defense's ability to cover, and if we're not able to get pressure, that is going to be a really big issue for this defense. So Wilkins, please rest up. The good news is it is only May. We still got June. We got July, we got August, and the Raiders also were holding out Malcolm Kuntz, who he even said himself is probably going to be ready to get out there. Maybe they're just being overly cautious with Christian Wilkins because he is Christian Wilkins. Coming up next here on the show, we're going to talk about the Raiders players that need to step up, and I have these guys ranked from 6 down to 1, and I'll just say my top 6 Raiders defensive players that need to step up if Wilkins is out, but let's be honest here. Everybody that plays defensive tackle, every single person that you see on that list down there below needs to go out there and they need to step up. Well, that is everybody besides Matthew Butler because he's not on the team. I'll update that after the show. So let's get in here to the top 6 players that I believe need to step up if Christian Wilkins does, unfortunately, have to miss some time. At number 6 here, I'm going to go with J.J. Pegues, the 6th-round rookie who the Raiders brought in. He's a bigger boy, 6'2", 309 pounds, and he's going to have to eat up some space. Also, we're going to have to see how versatile he is, and you're going to hear me use that word a lot here probably in the next 4 to 5 minutes. Versatility is so key with a lot of these defensive tackles that the Raiders brought in because we don't really have somebody that I would say is that true big body defensive tackle, nose tackle that I think Christian Wilkins brings to the table. Let's go to number 5 here. I'm going to put Tonka Hemingway above Pegues only because of where they were drafted. Tonka was drafted in the 4th round. Pegues was drafted in round 6, but Tonka Hemingway isn't built the way Wilkins is built. Their games are extremely different. Hemingway is a little bit more of this defensive end tweener type of prospect where Hemingway is a better athlete than J.J. Pegues. But if you were to tell me right now which player do I think could replace Wilkins at his exact position, I think it's Pegues better than Hemingway, but I do think that the Raiders think more highly of Hemingway considering where they drafted him. Let's go to number 4, and this is where I would say there is going to be a little bit of a tier break here. Not that I don't believe in the rookies, but I do know the Raiders are very high on John Ulalu, and he showed last season that he can step up and he can play. Another defensive tackle that I do think is a little bit thicker than what people realize, even if the weight is slightly under 300 pounds. But if I was a part of Ulalu's team, if I was a part of this Raiders strength and conditioning staff, I would walk up to him right now and I go, hey, with everything going on with Wilkins, we're going to need you to be the best that you can absolutely be. And if you need to gain a little bit more weight, that way you can eat up some space. Because this offseason, we need to have defensive tackles that free up Crosby, that make life easier for Malcolm Kuntz. And that's what really Christian Wilkins' big role was going to be. So I got to know down below from the nation, who is the number 1 player? Maybe it's not even somebody on the defensive line. Maybe it's not even an offensive tackle. But I got to know from y'all, the number 1 player that needs to step up if Christian Wilkins is out. My answer coming up here in just a little bit. Let's go to number 3 here on the list. I'm going to go with Leki Fotu. And in all honesty, out of all the players that I am going to talk about, the player that does scare me, but the player that I think kind of does need to step up almost the most is Fotu, who was signed this offseason, a free agent, and I don't really anticipate or expect a lot out of him. But what I would expect if Wilkins goes down is you could see Fotu be in that 4th man in that defensive line, maybe the 5th man, and all he's going to do is eat up double teams because in terms of size, he is the biggest defensive tackle we have unless you look at, like Tank, who's a UDFA, or Laki Tassi, who's the International Pathway Program player, or, even Traven, who was a UDFA that the Raiders brought in. I'm not just going to rely on those players. If a free agent ends up making this squad, I believe it's going to be Fotu, but he needs to be able to show that he can take on double teams and free up everybody else. I might go a little bit contrarian here, but I'm going to put Tyree Wilson on this list. The former 7th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. I know Wilson is an edge rusher, and I know that he plays defensive end. He also plays defensive tackle. And if you're without Wilkins, who you're paying all that money to, at this point, it's either put up or shut up time for Tyree Wilson. It's already put up or shut up time for Tyree. And if he still is unable to go out and show a team that you can rely on him when one of your top players goes out, and again, another tweener. And I think if Wilkins goes out, the way that they're going to try to do this is they're going to use Tyree Wilson, tweener. Hemingway, tweener. Pegues, tweener. We have so many tweeners at defensive end and defensive tackle. I think I might have just set a record on YouTube for saying the word tweener in a frickin' show. But the number 1 player that I would say has to step up for the Raiders if Wilkins is down, it's got to be Adam Butler, who the Raiders signed a 3-year, $16 million deal this offseason to. He would be your number 1 defensive tackle. And to me, Butler, the way that I would talk about him, is somebody that you don't really want him to be your DT1. But if he can be your defensive tackle 2, defensive tackle 3, you're feeling great about that. And the way that I would bring up Butler is the same way that I would talk about Isaiah Paul-Mao. I got the utmost respect for Butler. He was a player, the number 1 free agent. I wanted the Raiders to bring back Butler more than Spillane, Hobbs, right? Which might surprise some people, but I knew what the impact was for him, and I knew what the Raiders' plan was on that defensive line. Butler makes players around him better, and he will make players around him better. But I also think one of the reasons why he shined last season in certain moments was because people weren't focused on him. People were focused on stopping the players around him. Now, I am about to get in to some of these top free agents here in just a moment, but I always want to show people and explain to people ways to support the Raiders Report. And you can support this show every single day. How? First off, you got to hit that subscribe button. If you're not subscribed, then I honestly don't even know why you're watching the video, right? Like, hit that sub button. Make sure your notifications are turned on. Join the Noti Gang. If you enjoy this content, hit that like button. Believe it or not, every time somebody hits that like button, we get a notification on it. I see who's doing it, and it really helps us out. Comments down below. If I ask you a question, please don't be afraid to comment, not just on our live shows, but also on our videos like you're watching here. And then, obviously, Super Chats, Venmos are appreciated. Think of that as almost like you're tipping a waiter or you're tipping your bartender at the end of your meal or your drinks. Coming up next here on the show, let's get into some potential free agent targets for the Las Vegas Raiders that they could go out and sign. And I'm going to be very transparent. It's not a lot of names. And in the past, I've put a bunch of names on a show, and I've just said this could be a name, this could be a name, this could be a name. It's not what I did here. The names that you're going to see are the only players that I think legitimately the Raiders would reach out to. And I don't even know if it's really a Christian Wilkins type of replacement. Before I get into those names, though, if you do not know where you can get a Raiders jersey, you can go to chatsports.com/Raiders jerseys. We have some of the OGs like a Bo Jackson. There's Howie Long. I saw a Alzado jersey the other day when I was looking. Max Crosby jerseys available. Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty. I did also just see some brand new Jackson Powers Johnson jerseys, which were pretty freaking sick. They also have youth jerseys, and for the first time, I haven't seen this in years past, they have like toddler jerseys where they're legit, it's almost like a onesie, and everything's connected. They got women jerseys. If your dad's looking for a brand new Raiders jersey, Father's Day is right around the corner. Chatsports.com/Raiders jerseys. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. All right, so let's first get into the very first name here for a potential Wilkins replacement. And I'm going to throw out Jadeveon Clowney. Guess what? I know Jadeveon Clowney ain't going to play defensive tackle, but go back to all the things that I just said on these defensive end, defensive tackle tweeners. Can we just add another one to the list? Like, if I'm looking to just add the best players in free agency, the best player in terms of defensive lineman in free agency, in my personal opinion, is Jadeveon Clowney, who's had 15 sacks the past 2 seasons combined. Yes, he does play defensive end, but he's also a solid run stopper. He can get after the quarterback. He also has ties to Pete Carroll back in 2019, where he played 650 snaps with an 87.3 PFF grade. Not saying that he's going to be a person to put in at defensive tackle, but if you're going to replace Christian Wilkins, it's going to be a team effort, and we already got enough tweeners to be able to move some guys around with that versatility. Though, if you told me right now that the Raiders are going to go out and they're going to sign a defensive tackle, because I'll be real, I don't know if they need to. I like the depth that we already have here, but if you told me and they said, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to sign a defensive tackle this week, the name that I would put my chips on is Quentin Jefferson, and he played 5 seasons with Carroll from 2016 to 2019. Also, Carroll brought him back in 2022, but do y'all remember Jefferson was also a part of the nation in 2021? Doesn't have any overlap with Patrick Graham. That was the year right before PG ended up being the Raiders DC, but one of the most respected players that's not on the Raiders by Max Crosby is Jefferson. And I can remember a few years ago talking to Crosby, and Crosby's done some interviews around some of the players that have helped him turn into the player that he is. Jefferson was one of those big names in there. 32 years old, played 252 snaps last season, always brings that competitive edge. Know you're going to have a good veteran that's going to help out some of these young players. So to me, even if you brought in Jefferson, I don't think he would make the 53-man roster, but he would add a veteran presence and he would add some competition to a room filled with unproven players, which hopefully would make everybody better. Now, those are the only 2 free agents that I'm going to mention. But again, if we're in a situation where it's break glass in case of emergency because we're shitting bricks because we don't know if we're going to have Wilkins or not, I would actually pick up the phone. I would give the Baltimore Ravens a call, and I would ask, hey, is John Jenkins available? Because Jenkins was just signed, I think literally like a week, maybe 2 weeks ago by Baltimore after the NFL draft. And I say that because, yes, he's up there in age. He's 35, 36. But he played on the Raiders last season, has a good relationship with Patrick Graham, has a good relationship with Rob Leonard, has a good relationship with Adam Butler, and he proved to be a solid defensive tackle and a big boy on the interior, which this team needs. I'll be real. I'm only going to offer a 7th-round pick for him. And if Baltimore, I actually think Baltimore would take this deal because, again, they just signed him recently. And yes, every team can use some extra depth. But that is more of if we're really concerned. Like, I would rather the Raiders go out and trade a 7th-round pick for John Jenkins than sign Quentin Jefferson. But I would also just rather the Raiders go out and sign Jadeveon Clowney before giving away draft capital. Again, the John Jenkins trade is only if we are very, very desperate. So in conclusion, fingers crossed, dude, that Christian Wilkins is okay. But the quote that Pete Carroll said and the reports that are coming out of Raiders OTAs right now, they are concerning. And if you're not concerned, then it's only because it's May. I will say that the Raiders have enough depth that I don't think that, honestly, they would go out and try to replace them. They already have enough players on this roster. But if options are limited for this team, or if certain players don't show out the way that you're hoping they show out in OTAs, you can look at free agency. The options there are also very limited. And I would say Quentin Jefferson, Jadeveon Clowney, the top two. But the Raiders do have the cap space. The question is, will they do it? If Wilkins is healthy, that's all I care about. And I hope that he is healthy. Wilkins, please rest up, man. For more news, for more updates around the Raiders, make sure you subscribe. Make sure those notifications are turned on.